We're back, joined by one of our favorites here at Secure Freedom Radio, blogger par excellence, a longtime syndicated columnist, and best-selling author Diana West. Diana is, of course, the author of two splendid books, one, Death of the Grown-Up, the other, American Betrayal. And we're going to be talking about supreme betrayal underway at the moment, namely the deal that President Obama has struck with the Iranians, and assorted other countries, of course, but principally between the president and his team and the Iranians. I call it Obama bomb, and I want to get your thoughts, Diana, on the nature of this deal. It's been described. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch, since, after all, the administration's deputy national security advisor has told us this is on a par in terms of the president's priority and legacy with Obamacare. So why not the Obama bomb? What do you make of it?
Absolutely. Obama phones, Obama housing, it's an Obama world. Many can speak to the actual, the unmoored notions that are now in American policy in terms of trying to deal with Iran and allow them this march to the bomb. But I think that the fundamentals here can't be overemphasized enough, which is namely that we have normalized this regime, we have normalized its abnormal dealings, we have enlarged its importance just in terms of the whole circus of these negotiations. But we have also, in the process, completely eliminated any concept of the differences between the Iranian system and the Western system in the way negotiations are carried out, in the notion that there should be a level playing field before you sit down to negotiations. And here again, we're coming up against the gulf between the West and Islam in terms of what negotiating in this world means. And I think when you're dealing with mullahs, you are always dealing with a supernatural kind of sense of history, fate, and indeed life and afterlife.
Our guest is Diana West. You can find her extraordinarily important contributions to the public policy debate at dianawest.net. She is also, of course, the author of American Betrayal. And it does seem to me it's not a stretch, Diana, to describe dealing with these mullahs, with their, pathology of jihad and Sharia supremacism, as a kind of collective delusional state that really is putting most, if not all of us, in far greater peril than we are already. Give us a flavor of the nature of these mullahs, as you say, and why any kind of deal with them, let alone one as fraught as this one is problematic in the extreme.
Well, it probably boils down to the innate characteristic of taqiyya, of ketman in Islamic thinking, which has to do with trickery to advance Islam, which has to do with subterfuge, which has to do with norms that are not present in the bag of tricks brought by any kind of Western or non-Islamic, if you will, negotiator. So you're already dealing in this realm that really negotiators cannot deal with, because the Iranians are not bound by the same kinds of deal-making procedures as Westerners. Now, this is not unique to Islam. We can go back to our long history of pathological negotiation with the Soviet Union and look at how communism, too, is not bound by these same sorts of strictures in deal-making, in negotiations, in diplomacy itself. They use diplomacy as a means to advance Islam, not a means to make a deal, or a means to advance communism, not a means to make a deal in the Western sense. And so this is sort of the underlying basis that is always going to be doomed to fail for the West.
This is such an important point, Diana, that you're talking about really the inherent characteristics of totalitarian systems of whatever stripe. The jihadist piece with its practice of taqiyya is a perhaps extreme example of it, but it's rife with all of these others as well. Speaking of which, we are invited by your blog to focus again on a part of the world that we've been neglecting of late, Afghanistan. And in reading your splendid writings on this subject, Diana, and of course this is not something you've been neglecting. You've been on it for years now. It seems to me we can come down to basically 6 words in terms of where we are at the moment. No exit, no mission, and no Afghans.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about what's happening at the moment.
Yes, well, that's a perfect formulation, unfortunately and tragically, for I think it's something like 13,000 Americans in NATO forces that are really wandering aimlessly around Afghanistan, patrolling at peril, however, to their life and limb. And for those reasons or non-reasons, as you mentioned, the latest has to do with the rules of engagement, which, if anything, if it's even possible, are even more restrictive now in terms of answering even rocket fire inside the perimeter. We lost an American contractor within the last month, and inside the wire, a rocket came in, and when the this was an American Joint Check Patrol, went out, they were not permitted to search the likely source of the rockets because the person who owned the home didn't want to let them in. And apparently, this is the new Afghanistan. If you have to have a warrant.
You have to have a warrant?
You have to have a warrant.
Oh, my
or
God.
Or permission. And so, in other words, we're in a war zone with police rules. And it would be sort of horse opera, funny, haha, except this is life and death situations again.
For a lot of Americans and allied troops. And Diana, the absence of Afghans was also striking. Talk a little bit about what that was about.
This was the reporter who put the piece together, was observing this, that in these situations, in these more difficult patrols, particularly at night, the only Afghans in sight might be an interpreter, but these Americans were not being accompanied by Afghan troops, basically being told that they were not really ready, not ready after all these years, or I also wondered if not really trustworthy also, perhaps in some of these more sensitive kinds of missions.
And this really raises the question, they're supposed to be in front. We're supposed to be playing a supporting role, and if they're nowhere to be seen, this just aggravates further the absurdity of the situation. As you say, it would be absurd if it were not so dangerous for our folks. Diana, let me turn very quickly. We only have about a minute and a half left. What do you make of the preoccupation at the moment with purging our history and our country of any vestige of slavery or people who had any association with it? It seems from your writings at dianawest.net to be a rather selective treatment of the matter.
Well, it's selective, and I think it has really nothing to do with actual outrage over slavery. This is really just being used as a weapon against our history, against our founding, against our Constitution, and it isn't going to stop there. What you're speaking to is quite an easy way to highlight the double standard here, in the sense that we have this attack on people from these 18th and 19th century with associations with slavery or involvement in slavery. And yet last year, when President Obama held a state dinner for most of the heads of state in Africa, he included, I found, 13 leaders of nations who are in the top 25 of slavery nations today.
Now, this is not ancient history or even relatively recent history. This is ongoing slavery, much of it, I believe, associated with Islam and its practices. Diana, thank you as always for keeping your eye on the ball in all of these regards and for joining us each week to talk about it. We look forward to visiting with you again further next week. Jim Carafano from the Heritage Foundation joins us. We'll get his take on the Iran deal and what it's likely to mean strategically and militarily for you. Straight ahead.